In this video, I'm going to cover the most powerful food to reverse metabolic disorder and improve your metabolism. So in the video, we're going to be going through where you're probably currently stuck at under 2,000 calories, kind of spinning your wheels, doing a little bit of cardio and not seeing much fat loss, and understanding why you're stuck when it comes to your overall metabolism, and then what we need to put in place and why this food specifically is king for reversing metabolic disorder. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some key takeaways to actually kind of implement this on your own today, because the whole purpose of this channel is designed to help you, the subscriber, make immense progress in your fitness journey, get to your dream physique. And at the end of the day, I don't want to be right. I just want to help you guys get lean. So my name's Adam. I'm an online fat loss professional, and I specialize in metabolic priming, which is a process of metabolism manipulation. I've worked with 400 plus men in 7 different countries over the last 2-3 years alone, and we've used this process consistently with each and every single one of our clients to improve their metabolism, get them leaner, eating more food, and like my client Wayne here, get absolutely shredded. And so it's going to be a banger video, so stick around for the entire video, but I'm going to go ahead and start running you through this very quickly. So one thing about my client Wayne is he's 47 years old. So I know a lot of you guys watching my channel, majority of the guys watching my channel are probably 30 to 55, 30 to 60 years old, because that's typically the clients that we do work with. And I know that a lot of people have told you like, oh, over time your metabolism starts to die with age. That's simply just not true. What has actually happened is if we take a look back at a higher level view, is that society as a whole within the last 10 to 15 years has become less active. Food has become more saturated with carbohydrates and more saturated with excess fats. And so society's changing, not your metabolism. But there are processes that you could put into place to improve your metabolism and get you down to this 8% body fat mark like my client Wayne here. So the difference between these two photos in general is on the left right here, Wayne is eating 1,900 calories a day, under 100 grams of carbohydrates a day, starving all the time, exhausted, brain fog, and he's an avid cyclist. So he cycles very long bike rides, and he actually came from a previous coach in a previous program that really didn't specialize as much in the science behind body fat, and they were just pushing him to eat less, pushing him to do more, and his body just kind of had plateaued. And you can see in the left, he just looks like he has a ton of inflammation and cortisol aligned. And like for the guys that we do work with, keep in mind we do work with CEOs, business owners, executives, private pilots, doctors, and a lot of these guys, most of the guys we work with, have high levels of cortisol through their overall job. And the purpose of me explaining this is that, you know, you're not 22-year-old anymore. You're not a 22-year-old guy anymore. You can't just jump in the gym, lift a few weights, and get toned. You know, these guys need an actual scientific process and actual key mechanisms that align with their biology to actually get them to a leaner physique. And that's what we do, is we come in and we implement biological markers within their overall food intake to help them get to a leaner physique. And so this is Wayne right here at 2,700 calories a day, 350 grams of carbohydrates, correct macros. He's doing 100-mile bike rides with ease, and he's under 8% body fat, eating almost 800 more calories a day, right? And here's like the proof of the pudding right here. This is where he's at today as of calorie-wise. 200 grams of protein, 350 carbs, and 60 grams of fat. So you're more than welcome to follow the macronutrients I set out for Wayne, but quite honestly, you know, everybody in our program comes to us and we implement different macronutrients because everybody's body works differently. And it really does come down to the actual macronutrients. But the purpose of this video is I want to explain the best type of food that you can actually use to implement and actually improve your metabolism. So the first thing I want to cover very briefly is why you're currently stuck. And I don't think that the fitness industry in itself and online itself doesn't explain too much about overall metabolic disorders and what happens when you diet for an extended period of time. But something happens called metabolic adaptation, also known as adaptive thermogenesis. And so it is a physiological process where the body becomes more efficient at using energy, leading to reduction in the number of calories burned. According to Signos.com, this occurs as a survival mechanism to maintain homeostasis and prevent starvation when calorie intake or body weight decreases. Essentially, the body lowers its basal metabolic rate, the number of calories it burns at rest, and not in a response to weight loss or fat loss. How it works: when someone diets and loses weight, the body reduces energy expenditure, meaning it needs fewer calories to maintain its new low. This can make it harder to lose further weight or cause rapid weight gain. And why this happens is metabolic adaptation is a natural survival mechanism that involved in protect against starvation. It's the body's way of slowing down energy expenditure when it senses decrease in calorie intake. And, this adaptation can make it more difficult to sustain weight loss because the body is burning fewer calories than expected for its new size, which is where you see the very rapid weight gain in today's society, where guys get very low in calories and then just end up gaining it all back because they're not nurturing their actual metabolism based upon their biology. So like the hormones at play here, and I want you guys to actually write this down and remember this, hormones like leptin, thyroid hormones, and insulin are thought to play a role in meditating metabolic changes during weight loss. Metabolic adaptation can contribute to weight regain as the body tries to return to its previous weight. So now that we know this, basically metabolic adaptation happens when you eat very few calories for a very extended period of time. A lot of guys watching this right now have lost the initial 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 pounds, but eventually they gain it back. And the signs of metabolic adaptation is obviously weight plateau, broken down, body's hurting, fatigue, brain fog, low energy, terrible sleep, insulin resistance, increased appetite, bloated all the time, and even like sex drive decreases as well. So I want to actually pull up an actual diagram of your metabolism, right? And so I think this is very interesting to put into the context because a lot of people don't really understand the totality of how your metabolism works. So like remember above, we talked about the basal metabolic rate starting to decrease as you lower food. Well, 60% of your entire metabolism is your basal metabolic rate, right? And so the other percentages are thermic effect of food, how many calories it takes your body to break down and digest food, and then active energy expenditure. So keep in mind, this is actually a two-part quadrant in actual scientific perspective. It's usually right down the middle right here in active and non-active energy expenditure. So you have your NAEAT, which is your non-energy activity thermogenesis, and then your active energy expenditures, which makes about 15%. So put this into context. The more cardio you guys are doing, you guys are trying to push through that 15% and trying to burn more calories, while your basically basal metabolic rate is just absolutely shot. And so like planned and non-planned exercise is walking, working out, moving around. And so like within this, we have like your walking, which is like neat non-planned movements, like me moving my hands right here, typing on my keyboard all day. And then you have your active energy expenditure, which is like the actual working out and planned exercise, which makes only 15%. So you put in the you can understand why most people actually get stuck trying to push through this 15% while this 60% is all the way diminished, right? So we, as a program and as scientific individuals that actually sustain our clients' weight loss, focus on the 60%. So we have almost a 6 times more advantage over our clients' weight loss by utilizing the 60% rather than the 10 to 15. So how do we fix this? Optimize thyroid function, increase protein, follow macros, increase muscle mass, water. So the one thing I want to bring up, and the whole purpose of this video, is the specific food that will actually help break fat loss plateaus and improve metabolic disorders is actual carbohydrates. And I know you're thinking this right now, like, no way, carbohydrates are the devil, carbohydrates are bad. No, they're not, right? So like carbohydrates, actually what they do is they play a specific role in maintaining cortisol levels and reducing inflammation, reducing adrenal fatigue. So I've put up this diagram very quickly. So basically carbohydrates do affect calorie burn. So they support bodily functions, which makes up 60% of your BMR, remember. Body's main fuel source, extra gets broken down to glucose energy and extra is stored in the liver, all right? So what we use particularly is a process called carbohydrate metabolism, right? Which is transitioning the body into using carbohydrates as its main fuel source. So now that we know that there's a correlation between carbohydrates and your basal metabolic rate, when we actually transition our clients into more of a carbohydrate metabolism state, we are now having more control over their overall BMR. And you can't just overeat on carbohydrates and just go crazy on carbohydrates because yes, you will get fat. You will store excess in the liver and excess stored in fat cells. But when you eat the correct amount of carbohydrates, there's a synergistic effect that happens within the body with actually reducing body fat while eating more food because we're focusing on that massive 60% rather than this small 15 to 20. So we use carbohydrate metabolism, right? So primary fuel source carbohydrates, storage, excess stored as glycogen in the liver, metabolic process. The body breaks down carbohydrates into glucose, which then is then used to sell for energy through a process called glycolysis. Glycogen is stored from glucose ready available energy during times of high activity when carbohydrates is low. So imagine if you have no carbohydrates in your diet or under 100 carbohydrates in your diet and your body's just highly fatigued, right? It has no form of carbohydrates to reduce all of that excess cortisol. And so stick with me here, and I'm going to actually show you how to actually run through this really quick and actually improve your metabolism of new carbohydrates. But I want to kind of cover this because, you know, there is a big misconception in the society, in today's fitness industry, that carbohydrates are bad. And I'm sorry, but the fitness industry has simply lied to you. They've pushed low-carb dieting onto people for the last 10 years because it's an easy way for people to lose fat. And as a society, as we have a regain weight loss problem, is that it's easier for people to say just don't eat carbs instead of understanding how many carbs to eat to actually sustain a lean physique. So there's a phrase called fat burns and carbohydrate flame, which refers to the scientific concept that the body needs a presence of carbohydrates to effectively utilize fat as an energy source, meaning that without sufficient carbohydrates, the body cannot efficiently break down and burn fat molecules. Essentially, carbohydrates act as a necessary component for the complete oxidation of fat within the body's metabolic processes. Okay, so there's a two-step process to losing body fat: fat mobilization, fat oxidation. So you have to mobilize the actual body fat and release the triglycerides within the fat cells into the bloodstream to be mobilized. And this can be done from the induce of epinephrine and adrenaline. This is where like cold plunges have gotten their popularity, but you cannot actually burn fat without oxidizing it. So no matter how many times that you mobilize the body fat with these cold plunges, with these excess cardio and excess bouts of epinephrine and adrenaline, if you're not oxidizing it properly, it's going to go right back into the fat cells. So how do we oxidize it properly? We use carbohydrates, right? So the biomechanical mechanism is when carbohydrates are broken down, they produce molecules like oxalate, and which are crucial for the citric acid style pathway where fatty acids are fully oxidized to generate energy. Without sufficient oxalate, the fat metabolism slows down. Impact of low-carb diets. So this is where very low-carb diets can lead to a state called ketosis, where the body starts to produce ketones and body manages to lack of ready available carbohydrates. And then while the phrase is commonly used in important notes, it's a simplification and doesn't fully capture the complex interplay between carbohydrates and fat metabolism, right? So basically, you know, a lot of guys who try these like quick fad diets that they see online, they just cut carbs out of the diet because that's what they've been told, and they make progress for a couple weeks and then they get plateaued, right? So I want to bring up something that actually is very interesting when it comes to the role of hormones within overall carbohydrate metabolism, right? So the role of hormones like leptin, thyroid hormones, insulin are thought to play a role in mediating metabolic changes during weight loss. Well, there is actually scientific study that is done on carbohydrates and NEAT and T3, which T3 is the active thyroid hormone, right? So you remember how we talked about this small percentage of non-energy activity thermogenesis right here makes up active energy expenditure? Well, carbohydrates actually directly impact NEAT. So carbohydrates can indirectly affect NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, by influencing energy levels. As the body's primary use of carbohydrates for fuel, when you consume sufficient carbohydrates, you have more ready available energy to perform everyday activities, potentially leading to a higher level of non-energy activity thermogenesis through increased movement and fidgeting through the day. So what this is specifically trying to say is that when you have more energy, you're more likely psychologically to move more without realizing it. So therefore, your non-energy activity thermogenesis starts to go up. So they've done a study in individuals that like to fidget, that have a fidgeting problem, maybe like the knee twitchers, the keyboard smackers, whatever it may be. And those individuals burn 500 more calories per day through non-energy activity thermogenesis. To keep in context, your workouts only burn about 300 calories, max, 200 to 300. So you burn quite literally twice as much without even thinking about it by having carbohydrates implemented into your diet. Another study that I want you to be very aware of is the actual role and importance that carbohydrates play on T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. So remember up here how we talked about that regulation of hormones is something that happens within overall metabolic adaptations, like hormones like leptin, thyroid, and insulin play a role in metabolic changes. Well, what happens when you start to go into a very low carbohydrate diet is you actually start to lower T3. So I want to run you through this really quickly to understand what T3 is, just so you have a higher level concept. But yes, carbohydrates influence levels of T3, the active thyroid hormone. Specifically, a high carbohydrate diet appears to be associated with higher T3 levels compared to a very low carbohydrate. This is because carbohydrates, along with overall caloric intake, can affect the conversion of T4, inactive thyroid hormone, into T3. Additionally, low carbohydrate intake can impact the production of reverse T3 and an inactive form of thyroid hormone that can block the action of T3. So carbohydrates and T3 conversion. T3 is the active thyroid hormone that regulates metabolism, glucose management for a lot of you guys with glucose problems, and other bodily function. The body converts T4 into T3, and carbohydrate intake appears to influence this conversion process. Impact of low-carb diets. Very low carbohydrate diets like ketogenic diets may reduce T3 levels. This is because a lack of carbohydrates can reduce the conversion of T4 to T3, potentially increase the production of reverse T3. So insulin, which is released in response to carbohydrate intake, may play a role in the enzyme that converts T4 to T3. So the Vermont study, among others, found that both T3 and reverse T3 are sensitive to calorie and carbohydrate intake, with low intake potentially leading to lower T3 and higher reverse T. So carbohydrate thyroid hormone regulation. In general, dietary carbohydrates and overall caloric intake are thought to play a role in regulating thyroid hormones, with the carbohydrate intake potentially being a main determinant of T3 levels. So what we're trying to explain is that, when you eat very low carbohydrate diets, your basically thyroid hormones start to diminish, right? Which is where metabolic adaptation occurs. And the reason why we use carbohydrates as a key mechanism to improve our clients' metabolisms is because we can use carbohydrates from a multi-advantage perspective by utilizing the basal metabolic rate and increasing calories into carbohydrates by increasing basal metabolic rate, but also increasing overall T3 levels, which allows you to eat more carbohydrates and allows your body to utilize those carbohydrates to burn more body fat, right? And so when you start to look at it from more a scientific perspective, it starts to make a lot more sense why a lot of guys who get in these low carbohydrate, low calorie diets get relatively pretty stuck. And what we do in particularly is we improve their metabolism by using carbohydrates to their advantage. So the active concept of this and what we can actually take from this video, and so you guys can have some actual stuff to actually take along with you, is this right here. Here's how to do this properly. So stay along with this and make sure that you listen in, because I'm going to give you all the sauce to make as much progress as humanly possible. So here's how to do this properly. Drop all extra cardio, as long as your cardio is not hobby related, right? So for instance, my client Wayne here, and this is a question that I've gotten pretty often, is well, if I like BJJ workouts, or if I like cycling, if I like rock climbing, if I like running, do I have to cut that? Not at all. Just to know that if you do keep those in, that you're going to have to raise your carbohydrate intake even higher to overcompensate for the excess energy excretion from those hobbies. So it's you can if you want, and that's perfectly fine. But what we do with our clients, any excess cardio that we do, we can kind of just drop, because it's going to reduce a lot of inflammation, reduce a lot of cortisol in itself, and it'll keep us from having to get up to the 4,000, 4,500 calorie mark. But it's perfectly fine. You can do it either way. So if you're somebody who has hobbies like bike riding, raise your carbohydrates into that hobby. And if you're somebody who just is doing 2 hours of cardio a day because you think it's going to get you lean, just cut all of it. You don't need it. It'll be more beneficial without it. So the next thing you want to do is add 50 grams of carbohydrates to your diet and stick with it for 2 weeks, right? So I'm going to highlight this. So add 50 grams of carbohydrates to your diet for 2 weeks and stay consistent with hitting them. And this is the most important thing, is that where most people will go wrong is they'll add a crap ton of carbohydrates at once, and they'll gain weight really fast. Well, obviously, yes. And you've probably heard before, I've heard many clients before say, when I eat carbohydrates, I feel bloated, I feel groggy. Yeah, because you're flooding your body with carbohydrates, not transitioning your body to utilizing carbohydrates. So if you put a lot of carbohydrates on, then yeah, you're going to dampen that metabolism out even more. You're going to feel like crap. Your energy is going to be shot. But you need to slowly add those carbohydrates in. So start with just adding 50 grams of carbohydrates to your diet for 2 weeks. If you've been eating 100 grams of carbohydrates a day, start at 150 and do it for 14 days straight. On the dot, 150 grams of carbohydrates. And then next, drop the fast to 60, right? Because this will overcompensate for the amount of carbohydrates that you're actually adding into your diet, so we can equate calories more similarly, right? And so add 150 grams of carbohydrates to your diet for 2 weeks, drop all cardio, keep fats at 60, and you will see progress, immense progress in energy levels and focus and overall attention span and overall performance. Everything in between, everything will improve. You'll start to get leaner, eating more food. And I know a lot of people who watch my channel try this and holy crap, I don't understand how this is happening. Well, I'm telling you the science behind how it's happening and how I've done it with 400 other people before you. So add 50 grams of carbohydrates to your diet for 2 weeks. And the next week, after those 2 weeks, add 50 more, right? Let your body transition. Let your body overcompensate. Let your body actually absorb the carbohydrates properly. So do that. And then what we need to do from a more carbohydrate perspective is stick to single ingredient carbohydrate sources. Very, very simple. White rice, cream rice, fruit, rice cakes. I know the doctors will tell you stay away from white carbohydrates, well, that's complete bullshit. I'm sorry. White carbohydrates are easily digest because they're higher on the glycemic index. They're easy for the body to utilize because they're fast-acting carbohydrates that make an impact relatively very quickly because they don't have a digestive process to actually go through. And, the single ingredient will help with actual nutrient absorption and nutrient uptake as well. And so single ingredient white carbohydrates that are going to be higher in the glycemic index. Obviously, let's think about it from the doctor's perspective, just to touch on it really quick, why they tell people this, is that the white carbs are going to be higher in calories. The brown carbs, like your brown rice, your oats, your wheat, your bread, whatever it may be, those are going to be lower in calories and higher in volume. And so for the average person, it's you can simply just do brown carbs and save calories psychologically, but I don't coach average people. I coach very high level executives who want to get to a next level physique, not overweight men, right? And so it takes a little bit more precision. It's easy for the doctors to say, hey, stay away from white carbs because they're higher in calories, instead of telling somebody, hey, track your macros, eat these type of carbohydrates, don't go over this amount of carbohydrates, eat this amount of protein, this amount of fats. Nobody's going to do that. But my clients are the guys who are very high achieving individuals, and they'll go above and beyond. So I tell them exactly how we do this. And at the end of the day, I don't want to be right for you guys. I just want to help you guys make progress. I'm not here telling you that, this is what you have to do, and not preaching that the doctors are all wrong. I'm telling you, this is what has worked for us. This is what is continued to work for us. And this is how we've seen almost 400 plus client transformations in the last few years using this exact process. And so, if you guys do think that I give you guys on this channel the actual sauce, you guys have no idea what I actually give my paid for clients who are actually in my program. The love, the attention, the customization, the detail, the programming down to what you have going on for the week. And so this will be a high level concept for you to make good progress. And you can go through my entire channel, and the entire channel is designed to help you make progress. But just keep in mind that I withhold a lot of information for my in-person clients, right? For the guys who actually, are dedicated and in making the investment into themselves, right? And so try this out, come back to this video, comment below, and tell me how it goes, because I'm 1000% confident after doing this over 400 plus times before this, that this will work, right? And so if you like this type of video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm doing videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the purpose of teaching each and every single one of you individuals this science behind how to lose body fat, and what has made me, my clients, very, very successful in maintaining a very strong, lean physique. So if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe to the video. I'll see you guys next time.